Hi, I'm Chris from Simul, and today I'll be doing a tutorial covering the creation of storms within Unreal Engine 4. In this tutorial, I will be assuming that you are fairly familiar with trueSKY. If you are not, I'd suggest going to our channel and checking out some of the other tutorials which will cover the setup and initial settings within trueSKY, and hopefully get yourself more familiar before moving on to this. As you can see, I currently have a scene demonstrating what a storm can look like. However, we're going to start with a fairly basic scene. All that I've done here is I have added a single cloud keyframe, up the cloudiness that we have, full cloud coverage, and increased the strength of the precipitation so that we have constant rainfall. And I've also edited a few values within my sequence actor as I do in my other videos, and changed a few precipitation values just to control the strength of the rain within the scene. So in order to create a storm, we will simply navigate to our sequence, go to our timeline, right click, and there is an add storm button. And this will create a small bar at the bottom of your uppermost cloud layer. If you were to create another cloud layer, this bar will remain on the first cloud layer that it comes to. In order to change the time of day that the storm occurs, you just need to grab the ends of this bar and you can manipulate whereabouts it affects. If you also want to have multiple storms occur at different times of day, you can also have that functionality just by creating another storm bar. But for the case of this tutorial, I'm going to stick to just one, just so that everything is a bit clearer and slightly more simple. Some of you may have noticed that while the storm bar itself is selected, there is a small blue circle apparent within the cloud viewer. This is a visualization of where the storm will actually be occurring within your scene, with the red cone showing the direction of the camera and your view. Although it may look small, you need to consider that this cloud window is showing a large area of clouds, and so it actually might be quite large in your scene. And you can see the size that it is affecting and alter it by changing the storm radius setting, which is in kilometers. So as you can see here, this storm is 20 kilometers wide, and if we are to alter that value, as you can see, the area affected will increase, and decreasing it will do the same. I will now run through the settings that are available to us. The first and foremost is this small tick box at the top, which is named real time. The only differences between having real time on or off will determine whether or not the storm itself is being generated in real time so that we can view it within the editor window and it will just constantly be occurring, or within game time if it is not selected, in which case the storm will only appear when you press play. I'm sure by this point many of you want to be seeing a storm within your editor yourself, and showing what the other values do will be a challenge without being able to actually see lightning bolts. So I'm going to skip ahead slightly on some of the values, and I'm going to increase the frequency. This is a setting that pretty much does what you would expect and increases the frequency of the lightning bolts, which, as you can now see in my viewport, are now happening fairly often. Another thing that we can do is, while that we have the bar on our timescale selected, if we click and move the storm, it will function much like a keyframe, and I'm just going to move it so that the entire storm is within our view, so that we don't have any lightning bolts going off behind us that we can't see. We also have a setting called strike duration. This is another setting that is pretty self-explanatory, and it will just increase how long each strike remains on the screen. I generally like to leave it at default or only increase it slightly depending on the storm I'm creating or the scene it is being used in. Now I'll move on to covering some of the general settings now that we actually have lightning occurring within the scene. My first port of call will be vertical to shear. This one is slightly confusing to begin with, but all that you need to know is that vertical is 0 and will cause all the lightning bolts to be vertical. And if you set it all the way up to 1, all of your lightning bolts will go horizontally across the sky or be within the cloud itself. So generally I like to keep it at a pretty low value, but not quite at 0, just so that we get some variation within our lightning bolts. Next up, I'll cover levels and branches. These two settings work hand in hand. Levels will cause a split off from the main branch of the lightning, and then from the generated level we can create branches. I'll show an example, hopefully this will explain it better. So currently we only have two levels, so we have the main section of the bolt. See if I can catch a long duration. So we have the main bolt, and then one level would be this small section. If I were to increase the level and lower my duration to try to generate another one, as you can see, we now have multiple levels. And then increasing the branches on this would then cause, as you can see, a lot of extra pieces branching off those levels that we have created. For now though, I'm going to leave these on default. Branch angle is another fairly self-explanatory setting once you understand how branches are generated, and all it'll do is change the angle at which they occur. Adjusting the roughness will affect how much the lightning bolt changes direction during its strike. Normally you'll want to keep it at default or near default. As you can see, it creates some good shapes, but if we set it down to 0, you will see that all of the lightning bolts are dead straight, and if you increase it all the way up, you can get some absolutely crazy shapes being generated. Storm radius was a setting that we mentioned earlier and just controls the size of the overall storm. And as mentioned earlier, you can move the storm by clicking on the keyframe, and it will visualize the size of the storm within your scene using the small blue circle. And finally we have the rendering settings. Generally again, I would leave these at default, as all they do is affect the pixel width, so the size of the lightning bolt, or the radiance, which is just how bright the actual bolt is itself in comparison to the scene around it. A setting many people may not be aware of is the fact that we provide the ability to have thunder sounds occur as each lightning bolt strikes. In order to do this, we can go to our trueSKY sequence actor, and within the storm section we can add a new array element which is under thunder sounds. Sadly, trueSKY does not ship with its own thunder sounds, but I'm sure that you can find some either online or record your own if you're lucky enough to have a thunderstorm. For this example though, I will use one of the starter content ones, and I will use the VR teleport noise. So it will not sound directly like a storm, but you'll get an idea of the noises and the ability of placing sounds to go alongside your storms. This will not do anything until you press play. If I go ahead and simulate now, we will hopefully hear some sounds. You may have noticed that sometimes when the lightning strikes there was no sound. This is just due to the fact that the lightning was too far away for the sound to reach us. Another thing that we do supply with the trueSKY plugin is thunder attenuation, which essentially will take the thunder sound that you have used and will put some slight reverb to it and make it sound as though it is echoing in the distance, and this will also be affected by how far away the lightning strike has occurred. You can find our thunder attenuation within our trueSKY plugin content. An easy way to get to this is if you just go to your translucent render target and click on the Find in Content browser, and then step back one folder, it will take you to that folder. And here you'll see thunder attenuation. If you just drag this in, it will affect the sounds as expected. This itself has a lot of settings within it. Default will produce what we want, and I could probably make a video on its own describing what each of these settings do, so I'm going to leave them all on default. And then once again, if we press play, you will hear that the sounds are coming through slightly differently. So there it is, a brief overview of how to set up storms within your scene using trueSKY. As always, I'm very excited to see what you all create. Feel free to reach out to us on all of the social medias, which will be linked in the description below. Use the trueSKY hashtag, or head on over to our Slack channel or our Q&A board for more discussions on all things trueSKY.